Welcome everybody tonight to the Business Roundtable. Each month, the Howard County Library System co-hosts an online roundtable focusing on a local business owned by a person of color in Howard County. Tonight, we celebrate women business owners. The March roundtable discussion will be moderated by Patricia Newby, MBA President and Founder of Strategic Business Partnerships. The roundtable itself is in partnership with the Ujamaa Business Roundtable, a roundtable of African-American business owners from the counties of Howard, Montgomery, Prince George's, Baltimore, and Baltimore City. Our featured guest at the roundtable tonight is Renee Mcswain, Acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist, and CEO and owner of Sagelight Integrative Wellness Center. I'm going to turn it over now to Patricia to introduce our guest and to get us started. Welcome in.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're able to join us this evening. Welcome to the Business Showcase Roundtable Showcase. The last Tuesday of the month, we feature a local business owner, discuss their business and the issues facing small minority business owners today. I would like to thank the Howard County Library System for their generous support and this great collaboration with the Ujamaa Business Roundtable. Now, our guest tonight, this is Women's History Month, it's almost over, is Renee Mcswain. And I just wanted to share a couple of statistics on women business owners. So in the United States, women-led businesses employ 10.1 million workers for $1.8 trillion in receipts. And this was in 2019. And I am so happy to have the pleasure of talking with one of our business owners, Renee Mcswain, who is an acupuncturist, a Chinese herbalist, and the owner of Sagelight Integrative Wellness Center. Now, I had the pleasure of chatting with Renee and learning more about her business. And I have to say I'm interested in Chinese herbs because my mother, on a trip to China, said she went to one of those doctors and he kind of looked at her tongue and told her everything that was going on in her life that she already knew from her medical doctor. So for me, it's a very, very exciting area. So with that, I'd like to thank Renee for joining us and ask her to just kind of start off by sharing a little bit about her journey and starting her business.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for having me. It's such an honor to be at this roundtable this evening. Yes, it is very cold outside, but hopefully we can generate some warmth as we chat and talk together and share like minds. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Renee Mcswain. I hold a doctorate in Oriental medicine. I am a Chinese herbalist. I am an acupuncturist as well. I started Sagelight in 2018. And basically my journey to get to Sagelight or to even become a provider was very interesting. So it really came from me being receiving care myself. So when I had my first son 15 years ago, when he was 2 months old, I ended up having severe neck pain, and which landed me into the emergency room. They gave me Percocet and ibuprofen and a neck brace and sent me home and said, basically it was stress. So find some stress management techniques, maybe, be able to meditate or get therapy or whatever the case may be in order to have some type of techniques to manage stress. When I got home, I then soon realized I was having an anaphylactic reaction to one of the medications, which was Percocet, because I had taken Motrin before. Had to go back to the emergency room, this time by EMS, to only be receiving treatment to treat the anaphylactic reaction. And as I was watching the IV drip, it really has to be a better way. I don't know what it is, but it has to be a better way. And so as I was getting discharged in the wee hours of the morning, there was a stack of business cards that was in the room that I was in the emergency room, not in the lobby, not in the waiting area, but in the emergency room itself, the room I was in. And it was to an acupuncturist. And so I grabbed one. I don't believe in happenstance. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe that was a message for me. And I put it in my pocket and made an appointment and went to see the acupuncturist. Within the first treatment, and I walked in severe pain with a neck brace on. She put a couple needles in my head, and I was like, what does this have to do with my neck? I'm not understanding. She asked me to take the brace off. I did, and I was able to have a range of motion of 20% from left to right, which I had not been able to do in over 2 weeks. And I just cried. I cried in the office, and I was like, I don't know what this magic miracle thing is, but I'm hooked. So there was a couple of treatments later, full recovery, no pain at all. And from that point on, I was a believer in this modality of medicine. And so over the years, I would, receive treatment, for maintenance, make sure I was in good health. And I was working in other arenas. I did health communications for a lot of federal agencies. And so at the time, I was always like a big advocate of, okay, what can I do as far as alternative or complementary medicine? How can I get this on the table so that we can do health messages on any type of alternative medicine? And at the time, the research was about that much in a library full of research journals. And it just wasn't enough support to be able to make it a full media campaign. But I realized and I knew how it affected me in the advantages and the benefits I received in receiving that type of care. And that translated into me going to school at Maryland University of Integrative Health, which I received my doctorate at. And I fell in love with the program, and the rest was history. I signed up and I was on a roller coaster ride from there. So my goal was to really start a holistic center where it was a hodgepodge of modalities that aren't often looked at or aren't often even realized that they're there, or there's a disparity as far as it being available to certain populations. Most of it is not covered by health insurance, right? Acupuncture is starting to be covered by health insurance more and more, but other modalities, not so much. And so it's an out-of-pocket expense. So my goal in starting Sagelight was to be able to have a center where we have multiple modalities under one roof so that we have a continuity of care with our clients. Right. So if someone's coming to me for acupuncture, but I want to refer them to our massage therapist or our naturopath physician, I can do that with knowing that I have a working relationship with that other provider. We can cross collaborate as far as our patient care, and that they are really taken care of, as soon as they walk in the door. And so that was really the main premise. We offer naturopathic medicine, of course, acupuncture, Chinese and Western herbal therapy. We also offer massage therapy, energy medicine, which Reiki, and those type of services. We also offer massage therapies, pelvic floor specialty, midwifery services, and holistic health coaching. So really people can come in and take advantage of all of the wonderful services that we have.
So Renee, that's quite a journey from making use of the services, and you were in health communications, I think you said.
Yes.
Then starting to research the whole complementary medicine kind of industry or modality. So this whole journey, so how did you make the transition from health communications to now you're using the services to you're going to school to get the certifications, accreditations, the degrees, to starting your business? So can you kind of take us through some of those steps? Because, there are lots of us who are passionate about different things, but may not quite understand, how do you translate that passion into actually starting a business?
Yeah. So, it really starts with really having a thorough understanding of what purpose you have, how do you want to serve, right? So I am in a service-based business. So my whole goal is to empower others, right? And we can do that in a variety of ways. I just happen to use acupuncture as a modality to do that, right? And so it really starts there of like really understanding what your purpose is and how do you use these tools in order to then put that into motion. So really for me, it was about getting clear what my purpose and how I wanted to service others, right? And how I wanted to be a help and what that meant for me as a person, right? Because in order for me to step into that role of being a provider, of being a practitioner, that means that I had to go through that whole experience as well. I had to go through the transitions of it, of me understanding my purpose, of me taking charge of my health, right? Or me being accountable for certain areas of my life that I needed or know that I needed changing, right? In order for that to happen. So really it started there.
Okay.
From
And
there,
then
it was just, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
From there, it really just started of, okay, now what's the blueprint of getting there, right? So I knew, MUIH it is the first acupuncture school in the nation. It started in the 70s. It was a big rebellion because they used to actually call the police on the previous owners, where they said, oh, you're practicing wackery medicine and you don't have a license for it. And so they actually had to get a MD to sit in while they would do acupuncture, because in order for it to be legit or validated, which is, it is what it is, but this is a over 2,000-year-old medicine that has helped billions of people. So however, but that was the regulation. So MUIH was one of the oldest schools, the oldest school out there. So had great accreditation, but more importantly, the program spoke to holistically what I wanted to provide, right?
Okay.
And so there's quite a bit of not only just the physical mechanics of acupuncture, but understanding that there is a body, mind, and spirit component to it, and how you look at someone as a whole piece, right? So that program spoke to me and was the right path for me to go on. Right. And from there, it was just really the journey of aligning, making sure that I was, looking into what type of services, and then also looking at who do I want to provide services for, right? Who's my audience? Who are the people that are going to naturally gravitate to me? And that works throughout time. But I will tell you, while I was in school, I put my seed money for my center my first semester in school. I knew exactly that I wanted to open a center. And so I took a sum of money. I went to my financial advisor and I said, this is what I want to do in 5 years when I'm done. How do we get there?
Amazing.
I was very clear on that, right? I didn't know all the ins and outs, right? I didn't know every step by step, but I had the vision and I had a direction. And I was like, I know at the end of this, I want to be able to put my investment into something that's going to grow. So when I come out, right, that I'll have enough money to launch my business.
And can you share with us the preparation?
Yeah.
So you were very focused and very intentional, it sounds like. So can you share with us some of your early experiences in starting your business? What were some of the challenges? What did you face?
Oh, well, so, it's kind of like, I will describe it like you do like if you're going to flight school and you're doing the simulations, right? And you're like okay, you're running the program and you got the VR set on and you're like, okay, and at this coordinates, you do this and you steer left, right? And then when it comes to, the jump day, right? Where you're actually going to jump out the plane, it's like, you're just kind of like, trying to find the rhythm of the wind. And that really was, although there was a lot of preparation and planning that went into it, jumping into it was, feet on the ground, boots on the ground. You got to like move and make decisions fast. And I will say being a business owner, and especially for me, a business owner with like a brick and mortar, like a building, a clinic, the compliance, the legalities of it, all of that. Being a business owner will test every aspect of your being. It just will. It is the most terrific training ground on character building and development. And so it really, because it's you're on the line. And so it really allowed me to step into a leadership role that I really didn't think about prior to. But when you have staff, when you have people supporting their families based on payroll, and you have a huge clientele of business, and people depend on you to be there, you either sink or swim in that respect. You step up, you're able to pull on your resources of who you are and your essence and say, I'm here.
Yeah,
right.
And it's
and
more
this
than
is
just your life on the line, and it sounds like. So you have
Absolutely.
other people that are depending on you. So what resources did you find to be the most beneficial as you were starting your business? So what experts did you call on to help you get things going?
A lot of it was, setting up a lot of the SOPs and operating practices. I was pretty well versed on doing that just from my many years of professional life. But I did tap on, people that had been in the business that had, clinical practices prior to for years, 20, 30 years, and bent their ears and say, hey, can you, just give me some advice? What are things I should look out for? And so that was always very helpful. Was able to link up with some mentors. I'm a big advocate of SCORE, SCORE in DC. So they have a mentor program. So that's very helpful. And so a lot of it was, being able to chat with people that have been there, and be able to gain a little bit of wisdom from their experience. But also I'm a hands-on girl. So I learned by rolling my sleeve up, to me, that's the perfect way to learn. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to be like, oh, I shouldn't have did that. But to jump in and get your fingers dirty, for me, that's just the best way for me to learn.
Okay. Now, was there a point when you said, what have I gotten myself into? I don't know if I can make it. And
absolutely.
What was that moment, or what were those moments? And what did you do to get yourself through?
Those moments, now being 4.5 years in, those moments come in and out all the time, now that I'm not necessarily new, right? I've, thank goodness, survived through COVID, and with, able to still flip the light on and still be able to be in practice. Now the new hurdle is like, okay, now where do we go from here? How do we grow? Right. And so there's always this kind of this ever-changing flow of, okay, we can't just get stuck on, okay, we did this, right? How do we go from here? And so every time that there is a transition point or a crossroad, there is always like, kind of like, can I do this? Or what am I doing? Or is this the right direction? There's always a questioning. And what I do, I put one foot in front of the other, and I just keep going. I always have a plan. I always have a blueprint, right? I may not always have all the succinct details all the time, because life happens, right? And sometimes things, resources, contacts, networks, all of those come up unexpectedly sometimes. I don't say unexpectedly, but I think when you put the intention out there, then the universe starts to provide those things. So it's really about just having that prep work, but really just, again, going back to the purpose. If you don't have a passion, or if it's not aligned to your true essence of who you are, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
Because, being a business owner, they're nice to like, oh, okay, I just got enough to make payroll, or yeah, I need to make this additional change, or I need to add this new system. How am I going to do that? And so there's always that kind of like management of like, how are things going to get done and continue to flow, right?
Yeah.
But if it doesn't align to the purpose, right, of why, then it becomes a continuous, like, why am I doing this, right? So for me, it comes back to the purpose of me being able to affect, and have a tiny part in people's lives to affect magnificent changes that they go through in their journey.
So as you think about your business and you think about the future and maybe as you dream and think about your aspirations, like what are you reaching for? What's the long game in terms of what you would like to accomplish?
Absolutely. So I am definitely all about, first it's about the re-education of what we consider alternative medicine and complementary medicine. I say it's first medicine. Most of, if you get Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, medicine, even naturopath medicine, a lot of the indigenous medicines have been around forever, right? They may not have had all the scientific journals because it wasn't, there was no invention of that then, but they have had countless amounts of it being effective to millions and billions of people over years of time, right? And even as an herbalist, some of the herbs that was prescribed 2,000 years ago, we still use in our pharmacopoeia today, like, because it's so effective, right? So it's really, really changing the conversation to say, complementary medicine is first medicine, it's preventive medicine, right? And it shouldn't be the last stop. Oftentimes I will get people in and say, oh, well, I've tried this and I've tried that, and I went to this specialist and I did. So I just thought, well, I just might as well try you, right? And then it becomes this big transformation for them. So really it's about re-educating the public about, this is part of your holistic care. This is part of your health. This is a part of your wellness, right? It's not just this side thing that you should consider, but it should be integrated into your daily life, right? So that's one. Number two is really to be able to spread these beautiful modalities to populations that often are not exposed to it or have disparities for one reason or the other, right? Economic, maybe health insurance wise, just, who no one knows about it, but to really be able to not just necessarily have it to a population that could afford it, but what about all populations, right? And to be able to really look in those populations and provide those services in an expanded way. And then I also want to, as I've already done, but really create a center where all of us crazy kooky, providers and practitioners of care can come and have a place. Oftentimes we're so scattered and we're trying to fit into a already established system or trying to fit into more of a Western medical system. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it would be beautiful if we could have this epicenter of where we can go, right? And to be able to sharpen our blades and get our teeth, sharpened so that we can provide these beautiful medicines and help people. So expanding wise, those are some of the things that I want to, go further into.
Very good, very good. So, the messages that I've received is, your why and your purpose keep you going. You have a plan, you're very intentional, you're very focused. How do people find out about your business? I mean, it's not necessarily a well-known type of healthcare. How do you get the word out?
So of course we have the standard, website, social media, all of those things. Those things they're helpful and, of course, absolutely needed. And, that's a life on its own as well, to maintain that type of online presence. We are, registered with Howard County under their minority business as well. But, honestly, word of mouth has been such a beautiful way of people to come to the center. I mean, of course, we get insurance referrals and those things like that, but honestly, people just, because of the changes that they see in their lives, they talk about it and sparks the interest in other people. So it's a composite of all of it. You have to have the marketing, right? You have to go out into the community and do community events. And we, certainly before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of community events in the center, and we're relaunching that as well for this year, especially as we start to get warmer weather. So that, being in the community, doing events, doing partnering events is a part of that, doing social networking. But, when you treat folks good, when people come and their life starts to alter because of a different perspective, a way of being, that's platinum. That's platinum marketing right there, because they really see the effects of what's happening in their lives.
Right. So you mentioned the pandemic, that you had the events getting the word out. What impact has the pandemic had on your business?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we were essential, so we were able to stay open through, when everything was closed up. But we did have to pare down, of course, our days of operation, hours as well, and, take emergency visits only during those times. So that, of course, dampered, our income, the profits that we would be able to get. And so there was a recovery period from that as we, started to add more days, as things started to change. But also just, we of course had medical grade cleaning supplies and things like that, but we also had to invest in ramping up on, a whole bunch of other things to make sure that we were reducing transmission and things like that. So those were other expenses that came out that no one planned for. We didn't know that was coming. And so so there was kind of a seesaw effect on that. Luckily our patient load, our client load remained consistent, and people really needed that care, especially, everyone was extremely stressed out, not knowing what was going on. So we were able to service that, but we also inherit more expenses as well, just to maintain, the health and sanitation of the clinic as well. But I think mentally, for me, I on a business level, we had the seesaw, but on a personal level, it really was quite a lovely experience in some degree to slow down, to just slow down and just take a breath and take a beat, right? And just really just have some time of introspection. And so for me, having that availability to do that really allowed me to then get creative of what I wanted to do next, and to really get creative of like, where do I want to see the business go? Where do I want to develop it? On a personal and professional level, how do I want to develop? And so for me, I really used that time as an opportunity to just kind of go back into the lab and to, and readjust, recalibrate from there. So it was pros and cons,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you've kind of talked about, being an acupuncturist and, the different modalities. How would someone know that they need to come to you? So what are the reasons why? What type of ailments
Mm-hmm.
do you treat? How would someone know if, yes, they should contact you because maybe you could help them?
Yeah, so people come to receive acupuncture for a number of reasons. Most people come out of pain, headaches, their knee, is in pain. They have an arm, something happened, they had an injury, they had low back pain. So pain is one of the main components that will drive people into, that was my experience. I went to an acupuncturist, I was in pain. So those are usually the number one factor. And of course, it's phenomenal in reducing pain, minimizing pain, or even getting rid of it, depending on the circumstances, if it's acute or chronic, and the lifestyle that the person has. So that's usually the main thing. But of course, it helps with chronic illnesses, high blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune issues. People come for that. But also just for stress and anxiety. People come from, for a lot, just to zen out and just to be able to just relax. And so it's fantastic in calming the mind and to help with depression, anxiety, and to really boost mental health as well, the immune system, because it is a full medicine. It helps with pretty much almost everything as far as physical conditions, psycho-emotional, emotional conditions as well. And also just if people want to really start to transition things that are maybe chronic patterns in their life, right? And so acupuncture works on a body, mind, and spirit. Even all the 360 points we use have a body, mind, and spirit component to it, right? So when I'm designing a treatment strategy for someone and choosing particular acupuncture points, it's going to address things that are affecting you on all of those three components, so those three levels, right? And so it's a beautiful medicine to help bring into harmony the body, the mind, and the spirit so that it can do what it's naturally designed to do, right? That's all acupuncture does. It brings into alignment, into balance, so that the body can respond and do what it naturally is designed to do. Right. And so that also goes into the lifestyle, that also comes into the psycho-emotional component too. And so those are things there. Now, that's just one aspect of acupuncture, right? But then there's a whole deeper aspect of it. And so we use what we call the 8 extraordinary vessels. And these vessels work on an extraordinarily very deep level. And so oftentimes people, now it's more popular when they say trauma gets passed down through genetics, right? Epigenetics is now proven this now, that things that happen within our lineage, right, on our mother and our father's side can actually affect us, right, in our present day. So that can be health-wise, right? So like people that have ovarian cancer or breast cancer in their family, and their mom had it, and their auntie had it, and her mom's mom had it, right? Usually it starts out as some sort of trauma that started generations ago that has never really been healed, right, and transformed. And then it becomes just more and more dense over time, that it starts to lock into the genome of that particular lineage. And then it starts to manifest in a physical way, right? So acupuncture, and even in the ancient texts, it says that if you can clear that within you, you affect 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, right? Just by you saying, I don't want to repeat these patterns anymore. right? And so it is a tool that can be used to go deeper in, to break those ancestral traumas and patterns, and to be able to reshape and recalibrate them to something different.
What an interesting body of work. And you mentioned, when you talked about the pandemic, you mentioned something about slowing down and going back into the lab. So one, are you manufacturing products? And if you are, what words of wisdom do you have for other business owners or business owners to be who may have a product that they want to manufacture?
So that was a more metaphorical. It's about like going back into the lab.
Okay,
To like,
okay.
right. But as a herbalist, I do plan to come out with my own line of herbal remedies, just for general health and wellness. So here's the thing. People are always asking me, either they come to me for like a specific herbal remedy, which I usually call into a herbal pharmacy, and they're able to, for their specific condition and what they have. But there's also things that, people can just do for wellness, right? And so being able to have those herbal blends available where people can drink as a tea or take as a supplement are always great. As far as product wise, I would say that you have to start off why you're making the product, number one. Who's your audience? Who are you targeting it to, right? And really, does the product really work? Does it perform the way that it is expected to perform, right? And then also for folks to really consider the time and labor that goes into it and the cost of the quality of the products or the ingredients that they're putting into it. If you're like an artisan and you're getting artisan prices on certain things, let's say you're making body butters or some type of body product, and you're using organic essential oils and things that are high quality, right? Then you want to make sure that your price point is going to reflect all of that, right? So that you're adding in your time, your labor, and what you're paying for wholesale for those products so that you can actually make an effect. So those are important things to consider about who your audience is, why are you doing it, and what's the benefits they're going to get. And then, be able to test it out from there, really. I mean, even in television, they have pilot season, right? They do a test pilot, just to see. And then they have an audience to poll it and say, that worked, or that didn't work, or I kind of like that, or I didn't like that. There's a lot of preparation that goes in before it gets launched. And so I can't explain enough as a business owner. Take your time and be patient and prep yourself, because once the roller coaster goes, it's not the time to go back. So, oh, wait a minute, I forgot the thing back there, right? You got to go on it, right? So the more prep work you do ahead of time is really going to benefit you, that you can think on your feet a bit more because you have the prep work and the blueprint in order to do it.
So speaking of knowing your audience, do you have a niche, or how do you determine who do you market to?
So because the gamut of our modalities, it spreads so quickly and so wide, right? Each of our providers have their own target audience that they treat. Some of our providers will love, they do fertility and reproductive health. And they help with, women or men that are challenged with, trying to conceive. So we have, providers that work specifically for that, right? Even our naturopath physician, she's a midwife. So she goes from the very beginning all the way up to the end of the pregnancy. And then she does pediatric care as well. So those are her targets, right? For me, I for whatever reason, I treat a lot of women, and most women go to the doctor more than men anyway. Men usually have to have a limb to fall off or something before they feel like, oh, I should go to the doctor, you know? So I do have a lot of women. I do have a lot of women of color, and I love that because I absolutely adore working with sisters and being able to go on a journey together and offer them a service that isn't typical in our population, right? But I also have a quite a bit of men, and the men that I normally get, they come in for some type of usual pain, you know, knee, low back, pelvic pain, you know, pain, hip pain. And then once we get them out of the discomfort level, then we start to open up all this other stuff. And the other stuff is usually all of the emotional things. We emotionally unpack things while we're in treatment together. And so it really is a beautiful thing to see men participating in that they're able, because they're kind of taught to just keep it all in and just like, you know, don't worry about it. And so it provides a safe haven for them to unpack this stuff and to start to look at it from a different perspective and heal and transform whatever the emotional experience that they had. So I kind of go both ways, you know, as far as that. I have a very equal and balanced practice of both. And, you know, I do treat, you know, men's health, women's health, fertility as well. But my bread and butter, like what I really love to do is I'm the kind of practitioner that I get real serious and deep quick. That's just me. That's my nature. You know, I'm like, if you're here and you're, you know, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to open up a space where you feel safe, right? To explore these other sides that you may not feel safe other places.
And as a result of that, do your clients have a tendency to stay with you for a long time? So, you know, some of the things I look at when I work with clients are cost of acquisition of a client and then lifetime revenue. You know, so there's some businesses where people may become once or twice, and that's it. Others, you could have clients. I mean, I have some clients I work with for years, 2, 3, 4 years. Kind of, what does your business look like?
Same. I mean, I do have some that come, you know, they're in pain. I get them out of pain. You know, see you later. And that's okay, no problem. You know, I may see them for like a kind of a tune up, you know, or they may come in a couple of times a year. But most of them that are coming, they have been with me for a very long time. I have some, you know, weekers, so they come every week. That's on their routine. I'm just on their calendar. They usually sometimes even have standing appointment times. And so, you know, I have become part of their world in that way, where they feel like something's amiss if they're not able to come in and to get treatment. So it's a both and I also get, you know, new people all the time as well. So it's always, you know, just it's coming from multiple pots. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to look back, so, you know, you've been on this journey for 4.5 years. As you said, you know, things are up and down. Things are go smoothly. You have challenges. You work through them. If you had to go back and do it all over again, what would you change? If you would change anything, what would you do, given what you know now?
You know, I mean, there could be things that I would say, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that. But honestly, it's all been worth it. Honestly, all the ups and downs and the challenges and, you know, the oftentimes just the stress of it has shaped me, and it has certainly built a tremendous amount of character in me. And so I would not be here where I am without those experiences, honestly. And that doesn't mean that some of them weren't painful or costly or expensive and all of those things. But it taught me a lot about me and who I am in this role that I'm serving. So I wouldn't change it, honestly. I wouldn't.
What about words of wisdom? So for current business owners, people who are thinking about going into business, what words of wisdom would you pass on to them?
Sink into your purpose and really move with the intention of aligning to your purpose, right? So if you don't know what the purpose is, then that would be the place to start, right?
Mhm.
And this could be people just starting out, or this could be also people that are already in business and have been established, right? Because sometimes in the midst of that, you can get lost in that, you get lost in kind of the activity of it all. So really sinking into and aligning to your purpose, and then everything from there is intentional, right? Everything is intentional, and whatever activity that you do for that business, for that, will be aligned to the purpose, right? And so that to me is the most important thing, because if you're in it just to make money, which just, yes, you want to make money. No, let's not get that off the table. You want to be successful in that type of way, right? But if you're only doing it for that, then you're going to, it falls apart, right? Because once you come up against a challenge or come up, against something that you didn't anticipate, it falls apart unless it aligns to that purpose. So I would say really getting very clear on that and really stick into that and know that will evolve, right? But the core of it won't, right? It will evolve how it looks and how you reflect it out into the world, but the core of the purpose won't. That will always remain.
I couldn't agree with you more. When you're up all night trying to make things happen, the thought of money is not quite enough to get you there. But the fact that you know what you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to help makes all the difference in the world. So we know the medical profession can be taxing and trying. How do you take care of yourself to ensure that you don't burn out?
Oh, absolutely. So I have to practice what I preach, right? So if I'm, telling people you're running too much, you're running too hard, you need to sit down. If I don't do those things, I will sit down. Like the universe will find a way, but like, you need to sit down. So I make sure that I really practice that. I eat well. I try to get 7 to 8 hours at least at night of sound sleep. I go out and get fresh air and sun and vitamin D, right? Because we are so vitamin D deficient in our society, because we all are inside and on our computers, and we don't go outside and be with nature. I exercise. I like to take walks around my neighborhood, because it's important for me to see the seasons change and to interact with nature in that way and just have a noticing of what's going on outside. I'm an active gardener, so I have 14 raised beds, and I have a grape tree, and I have blueberries, and so those are my things. I go out and like no one bothers me, and I'm just kind of out with the bugs and dirt and soil and sun, and I'm happy. So those are things that help me. I meditate. I try to meditate on a regular basis. So just a grounding practices for me are very helpful, so that I am aligned and centered for all the multiple things that I do every day.
So it sounds like having some outside interest to kind of pull you away from the business, so that you don't find yourself just kind of getting sucked in all the time, that you have some respite, something to kind of re-energize and rejuvenate and give you some objectivity and perspective, which is something I had to work on a lot. Because it's so easy for me to, just get going and loving what I'm doing and forgetting I have other parts of my life that I need to tend to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All those things that you just mentioned are good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I have a full family. I have 3 kids, 15, 11, and 8. So they keep me like sucked into like, hey, come out of that computer, or come out, we have other things to do. So, it's a balancing act, in a lot of respect, but, I used to say I was a good multitasker, but that's
Mhm.
really, that's a farce. That doesn't really
Mhm.
exist. You only really focus on one thing at a time. It may
Mhm.
only be a second that you focus on this before you move on to something else.
Right.
However, you only focus on one thing at a time. And so what I've tried to do is really prioritize, like really setting cutoff times of like, I'm done with work. I'm not doing anything in regards to anything of that. And setting those times so that I can have downtime so I can rejuvenate as well. But also, I used to be, I have 20 things on my list today. Let's go. And I was like
Mhm.
one of those, let's write it down and like scratch through it. And I got so much satisfaction like scratching through it. And now, no, not so much. I'm like, what's the top three? What's
Mhm.
the things I need to like imperative or needs to be taken care of? If I get to 4, that's great, not a problem. I'll sit right down all the things I need to do, but
Mhm.
I'm not focusing on just like, getting everything done in one sitting. So it's really a quality of life and balancing
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that both you and your husband have your own businesses. Kind of, how does that dynamic play out? You know, two entrepreneurs in the family.
I know. Well, he's been in business for 11, 12, almost 12 years now. So he had a bit of a leg up on me. I was when we had our second child, I decided to stay home and see what that was like to just be at home. I didn't have that luxury with my first one. So when I stayed home with the second one, he was able to really build
Mhm.
and go out and do his business. So we really try to do a balance of where neither one of us are out of the house too much, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes, if he has multiple jobs and things that he needs to take care of, that might be he's out of the house a little bit more that particular week or those particular weeks because of that. And
Mhm.
so then I will manage my schedule to make sure that, there's a continuity as far as the household and our kids. So believe it or not, we manage it pretty well. Like our kids are sane and well taken care of. And really beautiful kids. And so, it really is just about prioritizing. And for us, I mean, we're both entrepreneurs and we do this, of course, to be a service to others. But we chose to be entrepreneurs so that we can have the flexibility to be there with our kids and not have to beat the drum to somebody else's schedule. And that was important for me. So I've really been able to manage my schedule where I can be there, I can do the business, I can work from home as well if I need to, but I also need to, be there with my kids. I actually homeschool my 2 youngest kids.
Okay.
And we started that once everything started getting kind of crazy outside. And so we just continued, even though, schools opened back up, but it allowed me to be more interactive with them and really like participate in how they learn and learn them in a different respect. So, again, it's just about being able to realign back to what that purpose is. And then all of your motions, all your activities, then align to that.
Yeah, and one thing about being a business owner, it can be lonely. So it's almost as if you have a built-in person who understands what you're going through, and you have
Mhm.
some right there who you can kind of bounce ideas off of and kind of share experiences with. Is
Yes, yes,
that,
it's so important.
yeah.
Absolutely. So we give each other the floor, if it's,
Mhm.
something going on with this particular project or something happened for me at work, we definitely, and there's a relatability to it as well, because we're both, we both have multiple people depending on us, not only just
Mhm.
within our household, but
Mhm.
other people as well, to keep everything going. So it is a nice feature as well. Totally.
Yeah, so I just like to read a comment, Stephanie Bersal. Dr. Renee, thank you for your leadership that inspires me and your wonderful leadership in moving into opportunity that has transferred your passionate approach to acupuncture and healing. Again, I salute your leadership. I have learned so much. And I think that's probably the resounding you know, thought that's going through many people's heads who may have heard about this type of medicine, but really maybe didn't have the opportunity to learn more about it and how it might be beneficial to them. So in addition to, you know, sharing with us your journey and how you started your business, you've enlightened us into this alternative, although it is the first medicine, most of us see it as just in the Western world as alternative medicine. So I thank you for the education. You know, hopefully if there are people here who have some pressing needs and feel this might be helpful for them, you'll be hearing from them. But, you know, really appreciate your message on the why, the purpose, planning, being intentional, the way you approached your business and made sure that you made that sacrifice to put the money aside because it was important to you. You know, you could have decided to do other things with those finances, but you decided this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to need. And so you took the time to prepare and, you know, recognize that it's not just something you wake up and decide and then go hang out a shingle. You really want to put some thought into it. You really want to understand, take the time to plan, to, you know, understand maybe what you will encounter. You may not have all the answers, but maybe you can, you know, address some things, you know, by working it out on paper versus the more expensive way of working it out when you encounter it. So I just like to, you know, take this time to thank you for spending time with us this evening, sharing, and hopefully you've been an inspiration to some others on the call who may be interested in starting their own businesses. And so we just can't thank you enough. Your passion is obvious. It came through, and I'm sure that you'll be hearing from some folks on the call. Again, would like to thank the Howard County Library System. Like to thank Nat Austin for the time and energy he's put into the Ujamaa Business Roundtable, which is where we met, because he's providing a platform for business owners to be CEOs, to lean on each other, to learn and to grow together, and just appreciate this forum where we're able to share. And so with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us. Check out the Ujamaa Business Roundtable, check out the library and all the programs that they have to offer, and check out Renee and her business, and see what you can do to improve your house and look at alternatives. So with that, again, thank you all, and I'll turn it over to Nancy.
And I want to echo and give a big shout out to Patricia for moderating our discussion tonight.
Absolutely.
Renee for being with us tonight, for both of you for being a local business owners and women of color, and for inspiring us to believe that we can live our dreams. So I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight. I want to give a shout out to Nat for turning over the roundtable to women in March. That was he's a very wise man. So we're very grateful for that. And I want to thank everybody for spending this Tuesday evening with us. We'll be back again. And thank you for all you did to inspire us tonight, and for reminding us too to slow down. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.